And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you, Aquaba, and welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Rasta Report here on Thursdays. We call it Tech and Future Talk, where you and I get together live. We come at you from 9 a.m. Pacific Time, that's 12 noon Eastern Time, 5 p.m. GMT, and 8 p.m. East Africa Time. We get together with you and we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives, entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date is Thursday. It is the 7th of November 2024 in the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6264 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we have realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place on LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. Let me tell you about what we've got on the table for today. I hope you find this to be informative and provocative and transformative. Today, the program theme is the Democratic Party, Self-Destruction 2024. Well, today on Tech and Future Talk, our Thursday broadcast, despite an immense media-wide bias and perhaps the worst candidate that either party could possibly push into the election, Donald Trump managed a substantial win over the soon-to-be former Vice President, Kamala Harris. Do we know what went wrong? Join me today and let's take a forensic examination of the facts of how the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, I should say, could have completely bungled this national election, losing not only the presidency, but also the Senate majority, and further cementing Republican control over the House. Now, the House races have not all yet been decided, but it's pretty much assured that there will be a Republican Party majority in the House of Representatives as well as likely handing another Supreme Court seat if it comes up within the next 4 years. Very interesting. We're going to be looking at a number of different talking points. But before I go into that, and bear with me, pardon for the slight delay in getting the program up. We had a bunch of last minute issues that came up that I had to resolve, fires to put out at the last minute, and you never know how that's going to happen. And I was hoping, I was hoping to have one of my long-term friends join me today, because I had presumed he was about the only one that I could talk to about these topics that we're covering today that had some comprehension beyond just the superficial. Unfortunately, he accepted and then declined the invitation. And I'm going to be out here with you, my listening audience. I'm not afraid. I've never been afraid of having to go it alone. Never, ever, ever been afraid. We can't allow ourselves to be vulnerable to others' ideations like that. I don't want to, insult my friend. I wish I had more politically savvy people that I could talk with. I do know some very politically savvy people. Brother Junius, Brother Dwara, Brother Amasis, Brother Reggie, a bunch of you. But it's hard to find somebody available at this time slot to go live here on LIB Radio. If you, in our listening audience, if you want to participate in the conversation, just drop me an email note or text me your email, and I'll give you a link and let you join me here on the screen today. Let's go into the facts. First thing I'm going to begin with is a short video presentation. If you don't mind, I'm going to be sharing this window with the audio. And this is Ralph Nader, the author and political activist, longtime career political activist. Here is Ralph Nader in the aftermath of the election, speaking with Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! So let's share this video. I'm going to have to mute my microphone for just a couple of minutes. Let's share this video, and then you tell me whether the points he's making are salient points, or they might be distracting. You tell me.
Longtime consumer advocate, corporate critic, four-time presidential candidate, author of many books, including most recently, Let's Start the Revolution, Tools for Displacing the Corporate State and Building a Country that Works for the People. Ralph Nader is the founder of the monthly newspaper, The Capitol Hill Citizen. Ralph, thanks so much for joining us. Your response to Donald Trump's victory. It looks like he not only won the Electoral College, but will win the popular vote this time, as he didn't in the two past elections.
Well, Amy and Juan, there's going to be a lot to digest here. This is a collapse of the Democratic Party. They didn't get their vote out that they wanted. They were several million votes below what they expected, and of course that made the difference in an electoral college system in the swing states. But the problem is much more serious than that. Basically, we now are a country under a dictatorial corporate state. Trump is basically a magnet and a trap for the Democrats. They spent tens of millions of dollars on ads going after Trump instead of going after the 4 years that Trump deep six so many critical issues and positions in his term as president. So the problem is it's so many variables here to deal with. It all started, Amy, when the Democrats abandoned half the country to the red states. That's devastating. Then they started getting corporate cash in 1979, dialing for the same commercial values. That blurred their difference from the New Deal type Democrats to the corporate Democrats. Then they contracted out the election to these corporate conflicted profiteering consulting firms, which the mass media never seemed to want to investigate in this campaign. And then they abandoned public media. Basically, they abandoned radio to the Rush Limbaughs and created the Reagan Democrats. And then they never learned from their mistakes. They didn't learn from the mistakes of Hillary Clinton in 2016. Then they never fire anybody after they lose in one state after another. To horrendous, the worst Republican Party in history. And so what is the message that they gave to the American people? The message is Trump is terrible, and you can't believe how bad the Republican Party is. It's too general a message, just simple. A vast majority of people think corporations have too much control over their lives. They didn't fill the blanks. Denial of health care benefits. They didn't fill the blanks on a living wage. They didn't fill the blanks on cracking down on corporate crooks. They didn't fill the blanks on reversing a tax system which undertaxes the very wealthy and the big corporations. They didn't reverse themselves really on trade. They didn't know how to rebut Trump on immigration, and we called the people coming in rapists, criminals, drug traffickers, etc. Instead of saying, well, they're fleeing oppressive countries that are backed by the U.S. dictators and oligarchs. And
All right, I'm going to pull that off the stage. Maybe we'll return to that a little bit later. But undeniably, Ralph Nader had a mouthful to share in that short piece of video. Again, that was from democracynow.org. And you do hear Democracy Now! Quite regularly here on LAB Radio. I usually will play it at least 3 days or so a week. Some of the things Democracy Now! In its liberal position, I don't necessarily sign on to. Yet at the same time, I do agree that we should hear views that disagree with our own views from time to time. I know a significant number of you out there listening probably are going to disagree with some of the views I'll be sharing today. But some of the points Ralph Nader made, I think, are really quite salient. He did make a few points that well, here's his very quote. We are witnessing, or this is the collapse of the Democratic Party, quote unquote. This is the collapse of the Democratic Party, Ralph Nader, on the roots of Trump's win over Harris. Some of the other points, I was making notes just as fast as I possibly could. He talks about the Democratic Party did not excite the public. Their backing, their traditional backing, they did not excite them to get out to vote. If you look at the campaign, Harris, building on top of Biden, pulled significantly less votes than did Joe Biden in the previous election. So yeah, people weren't motivated. They did not get excited about this election, about this candidate. And the results are Trump wins. Had they been able to muster the same amount of votes that Joe Biden mustered in the 2020 election, there's a good chance that it might have gone a different direction, but they didn't, and it did go where it went. And it's going to be interesting after the January inauguration. Point Ralph Nader made about the dictatorial corporate state. Those of you who have been following this program that I do here for some time, you probably recognize this as what I am describing in my new book, World War V. Ralph Nader put it as the rise of a dictatorial corporate state. World War V is entitled The Global Elite versus the Workers' Middle Class. He also said that Trump is a magnet. And that's a very good point. Trump is a magnet. He's a popularist. And he's a magnet to pull in a bunch of different people who felt that they had been pushed to the periphery by the the dictatorial corporate state. And the dictatorial corporate state has taken over the Republican Party, and it has taken over the Democratic Party. So these people marginalized said, well, hey, I'm an outsider to this. And when they're looking for a candidate that matches their position of being an outsider, that was Donald Trump. There's just no debating that Kamala Harris was considered to be an insider. And even then, she's inside these concentric circles. And not everyone was allowed into those concentric circles. And so far as myself, I knew I wasn't in those concentric circles, but what I did not do was say that if that blue tie doesn't work for me, then I'll naturally default to the red tie. No, I couldn't say that. I had to say neither one. Try over again or don't expect my collaboration participation. Ralph Nader pointed out that the Democrats spent tens of millions, sometimes raising tens of millions of dollars in a day, probably spent in this whole election from the Democratic Party across the spectrum, undeniably spent well over $1 billion on a humiliating defeat. He made another point that the Democratic Party had been amassing corporate cash really going back as far as 1979. And this amassing of corporate cash undeniably turns out to be contrary to the best self-interest of democracy and politics. Here, another point, he said the election blurred the difference between the New Deal Democrats and to the corporates. There was this transformation from the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when many people left the traditional Republican Party, which at that time the Republican Party stood for the Republic, the governing constitution. This is a constitutional republic. So the old Lincoln era Republican Party was about the union of the constitutional government, as opposed to the Democrats or Dixiecrats at those times were about breaking up the union, breaking their covenant with the Republic. So now he's talking about how the New Deal Democrats, which attracted Republicans, now became the corporate elite, or as he called them, the dictatorial corporate state. A couple more points he made I thought were good. Relied upon corporate connected profiteering consulting firms to advise them of how to win the election. And that's one of my main complaints, is that the consulting firms basically spent too much time dressing up and putting lipstick on two pig candidates. Now, I'm not talking about their physical appearance as pigs. I'm talking about porcine, pork-like, swinish. That's what I'm talking about. That both candidates, in my opinion, both of them were tricksters, were fake, were phony, were smiling at times when the public didn't want smiles. We didn't want a fake happy look. What we need is some relief, because we, the public, we have some real grievances. One of our key grievances is the ever expanding wealth and income gap. It has been ever expanding since the late 1950s with the presidency of Dwight Eisenhower. The wealth and income gap. And about in the 70s, we saw that now accompanying with a significantly shrinking middle class. And that is very problematic, especially for a Democratic Party that over the course of the years abandoned the middle class. We're going to get to those points here a little bit later. A couple more points he made. They abandoned public media as well. The Republicans, the red tie people, essentially took over AM and much FM talk radio. And we get saddled with NPR, which is just a cheap imitation of a propaganda machine for liberal, left-wing, radically social policies and positions. And not all of us, including myself, consider ourselves to be liberal socialists. I am a socialist, but I'm not a liberal socialist. I am a pan-African socialist in the view or in the vein of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda, and others, including Thomas Sankara and Ibrahim Traore, Abiy Ahmed, Paul Kagame. These are conservative voices attempting to conserve our indigenous and sovereign nature, culture, and civilization. So, last couple of points. He said the Democratic Party, Democratic National Committee, did not learn any lessons after the Hillary Clinton loss and others' mistakes in these previous elections. They never fired anyone after their losses. And the last point, he said, too general a message given out by the Democrats: Trump is bad. That was about it. That's not positively affirming anything, if you ask me. So as we wrapped up that coverage, and we listened to about 4 minutes of, I think it was about a 12-minute or so presentation. He talked about the corporations, about the failure to deliver health care to the public, the failure to delivering a living wage to the public. Corporate crooks go unpunished. The wealth and income gap, the trade gaps in the trade, what do they call it, tariffs, which the restriction of trade put on by Donald Trump that the media and the Democrats complained so much about. Joe Biden signed on to that, and now very recently, just before the election with the EV crisis, the electric vehicle crisis, Joe Biden increases that. He says, I'll match your 25 and upgrade 75, raise 75. If you're playing poker, you know what I'm talking about. I don't play poker. I'll see your 25 and raise you 75. That's what they did. Well, at the same time, listen to how crazy this presidency is right now. At the same time, they're doubling the tariffs on Chinese imports of electric vehicles. They're also saying to the public, we're going to subsidize you buying electric vehicles. What? They double the price of the affordable ones, but subsidize the unaffordable ones. And the subsidy comes out of the U.S. taxpayers' coffers. So this schizophrenic leadership that has been in place for several years just got whooped. Just got whooped. I do see my sister, for Africa One, is checking in. Great to have you with us today. Hotep, Brother Keita, and Global Alibi family. I hope you can relate. Again, we're talking much about what's happening with the U.S. election, and it was catastrophic for the party that traditionally many of our ancestors signed on to. So great to have you. Now, I'm going to go through my list, and I was hoping to have discussed this with my brother. He's not here. We're going to just discuss it between you and I. My list of talking points. Again, today's theme, the Democratic Party self-destruction 2024. Talking points. Again, building on this talking point from Ralph Nader, this is a collapse of the Democratic Party. And I would say this much, the sooner that those people who thought that that was their haven for a future realize that this is a collapse, the sooner they're going to say, well, if we need democracy and politics and elections and governance, self-governance, then we better find another alternative as soon as possible so we can at least have 2 years to the next midterm elections to be able to manifest something, anything that will execute the will of the people. Point one was the process of selecting a Democratic Party candidate. Was it compromised by avoiding all of the primaries for selecting a candidate which is traditional? Was this a catastrophic mistake? Well, I'm talking to myself. I would say, yeah, it was a catastrophic mistake because they delivered a candidate who had not won any primaries. Kamala Harris, she had not won. She had not gone through one. She was not challenged on a stage by 4, 5, 6, 7 other people of her own party to put the best ideas on the table. The last time I recall, and you recall, Kamala Harris being on such a days, DAIS, with other Democratic Party primary candidates was when she stood on that days with sleepy Joe Biden. And she couldn't even beat him. He had to pick her. And of course, we see now that his mental state has very significantly degenerated over the course of his 4 years. That job ages whoever is in it. And so his cognitive functioning now is very low, as well as his neurological system is in very bad shape. Talking point number 2. So I would say yes, the lack of a Democratic primary system undeniably drew the life, the blood, the energy out of those who would be the Democratic Party loyalists. And so they didn't show up. They didn't feel included. This was picked. This was handpicked. I'm going to get to who handpicked it. Point 2. with so much baggage attached to Donald Trump. I mean, he's a misogynist, a narcissist, has been accused of being a racist, especially in his younger real estate career. Donald Trump is xenophobic. Donald Trump is a convicted criminal, multiple counts. Donald Trump, because of his criminal convictions, is not allowed to own a gun, even though, of course, he's surrounded by Secret Service agents, and they are all allowed to carry guns to defend the office and defend the candidate. But Donald Trump, despite all of this baggage, despite all of that, could any candidate have possibly been worse than that? Well, according to the election output, yes, there was one candidate worse than Donald Trump. And as I stated in the first talking point, that candidate didn't even have to get nominated by the Democratic Party. She was handpicked. She was selected. Talking point number 3. Can anyone, when asked, and I'm asking you, our listening audience, can you point to any solid key points of leadership attached to the Democratic Party candidate, Kamala Harris? I'm talking about, give me some solid points of leadership, not just she was a prosecuting attorney. Hey, there are tens of thousands of prosecuting attorneys across the United States. It does not necessarily qualify them to lead the imperial state. But what did she do? I've asked this question many, many times to other people. I do know one thing she did do. In 2022, I believe it was. No, it was probably 2023, because it was after the December 2022 USA Africa Leadership Summit. In early 2023, no, it might have been 2022. I have to check. It's easy to validate which year it was. But she made a trip to Africa. And she went to Angola. She went to Ghana. And then she went to Zambia. And they didn't like her. They did not like her because she's over there talking about you Africans and your social, cultural norms have got to change. If you want some of this U.S. money, and she carried about maybe $3 to $5 billion in giveaway money. So if you want some of this money, you're going to have to sign on to radical U.S. social policies, including feminism, abortion, and gender dysphoria. And you know something, in the aftermath, the Africans didn't like her. She went over to Elmina Castle, or the fort, one of those two slave dungeons in Elmina on the Ghana coast. And she wept crocodile tears. I've seen a lot of people, women and men, cry at Elmina and the fort. They're juxtaposed close to each other. I've seen a lot of them cry, especially standing in that dungeon where our people were locked up for 90 days before being put on the boat. To seeing the chain in the floor or in the concrete where women were chained up for refusing to be violated. I've seen a lot of people cry. And so she comes out with her crocodile tears. But many of us say she has no real social, cultural connection there. Any one of us and all of us could be moved to tears there, but it seemed rather staged and phony to me. I'm not the only one to say that. You may disagree. I'm not going to disagree with anyone disagreeing with anything I say today. What I am trying to do is just to get us to think outside the box, think outside the mold. Let's come up with some fresh perspectives. I do see Ronan is in the house. This is my brother Ronan. I've known you for how long? I think it's the same Brother Ronan. Greetings. He says, Kitty, salute. He said, some call the U.S. unlivable. Ronan, I increasingly agree with that statement. He said, both were extorted into running for president. That's what it looks like. And he said, Africa ain't gay for pay. Pow. Africa ain't gay for pay. And Ronan said, yes, in our 20s, brother. Yeah, I'm still in my 20s. Actually, I'm 34 now, Brother Ronan. Physiologically, chronologically 69, but biologically 34. I got my 300 and then the second set of 200 push-ups in yesterday. So I'm back. I'm back again on my front line with my strength and courage. He said, you look great, man. You write great. Let's get in contact. I'm going to put up my text number here, Brother Ronan, and text me. Text me at 702-580-0662. And let's have a conversation. Let's talk to let's talk over old times. He said, dreads to your knees, laugh out loud. Oh, Brother Ronan, don't. I'm going to check the other message board because you're about to get me off on a tangent, reminiscing with a good brother. Really good brother. I appreciate you, man. Love you. We're going through these talking points. Today, the theme is this is a collapse of the Democratic Party. That quote from Ralph Nader. Point number 4. And again, I asked the question, could anybody, when asked, point to any solid points of leadership? And let me put this question up so somebody can see it and maybe want to answer it. Because those of you who did believe in that party, who did believe in that candidate, you had your reasons for doing so. I hope it was based upon evidence. If it was, share that evidence. Mombera in the House, he said no. Dang, you answered that rather quick. I agree with you, man. I have asked that question. You probably heard me ask that question on the Mastermind and other places many times. Can anybody point to any solid key points of leadership attached to the Democratic Party candidate? Brother Mombera screamed it. He put it in all caps with an exclamation point. No. If anybody disagrees with him, please do show your evidence, and we will show you our appreciation for your participation. Continuing, and I hope I got a good sized audience today. I hope you do hit the like button. Brother Mombera, if you would like, I could send you the link to join me in case you are free to be able to do it. Ronan said they proved racism is Satanism. Ooh, that's a whole nother subject. And he says, greetings to you, Brother Mombera, as well. If you want, Brother Mombera, just drop me a note, say, yeah, I'll hang out with you. Because your voice here on your LB radio, where you have been heard now for the better part of all of our 23 years, your voice is always welcome. And I say that your voice, Brother Mombera, is always empowering. And you are greatly appreciated. He said, let's be honest, our people were flim-flammed, bamboozled, okey-doked. We've been misled. Correct. He said, yes, brother, send me the link. I need to do some venting. Here you go. I'm going to just real quickly grab this link, and I hope I can grab it. Oh, this one, stop sharing. Ooh, because once I start the stream like this, invite. And I'm going to copy the link, and I'm going to push this up on, I'll just push this up on the StreamYard here right now, Brother Mombera. And if there's somebody else who wants to join the conversation, I'll put you in. The link is there. Brother Mombera is going to be joining me in a second. I'll put you in. If you talk like you got some good sense, like you're focused on what we're talking about, you can stay in. If you're a troll and you just want to grab it and see how many times you can get the N-word in or do something stupid like that, yeah, it'd take me a half a second to eliminate you. But we are continuing. We're live and direct here on LIV Radio, LIV TV, and livinginblack.com. We are continuing. Let me keep on going on this thread while I'm waiting for my dear brother to join us. Point number 4. Did the cover-up of the extent of Biden's cognitive decline by Harris, Obama, and the Democratic National Committee officials and the media, did that contribute to the victory of the opposition? I say, yeah, it did, no doubt. It was a cover-up, and the people didn't appreciate it. So Mumbera says he's just taking a second to get set up. He'll be with us in just a second. Always great to have my brother in the conversation with us. So continuing these talking points, undeniably, the man everybody knew, and we knew this well over a year before the 2024, really about the time the 2024 election cycle is gearing up, and it took 2 years. We saw this man is suffering cognitive decline, and he's not going to make it. This job ages people very, very quickly, and so this elderly man is, unfortunately, his cognitive function is breaking down. He's losing it. Now, I'm not going to condemn an elderly person for suffering from cognitive decline. I do firmly state it doesn't have to happen like that. If you got a plan for aging gracefully and aging with all of your faculties intact, if you have a plan, you can work that plan and be very, very successful at it. But when we're witnessing and when they're making jokes and the comedians and the opposition party are all talking about the man's severe cognitive decline, you just couldn't cover it up anymore, but they still kept trying to cover it up until it got to the point where they bypassed the Democratic Party primaries, and then they just ushered Kamala Harris into the position. She wasn't ready. She wasn't prepared. She wasn't that good. They thought it would be Barack Obama 2.0. But unfortunately for all of us, and obviously for the candidate as well, Kamala Harris was not Barack Obama 2.0. Although, and I do see Mumbera joining us, please do comment on this statement. Although, when it was finally acknowledged they could no longer cover up the cognitive decline and dementia of Joe Biden, that was when Barack Obama stepped in the background and said to his old friend, former vice president colleague, you're going to have to stand down and let's put your vice president, Kamala Harris / Barack Obama 2.0, let's put her into the position. And then I'll try, and Michelle will try to guide her to become the leader that she never had proven herself to be. Brother Mumbera, we have you in the house. Aquaba, unmute yourself, dear brother, and talk to us. What are you hearing today you would like to share?
Greetings, Brother Keaty. Greetings to the LIV family. Can you hear me okay?
You sound fantastic. If you had a camera, you probably would look good too, but you don't have a camera, so you ugly.
Okay. I have to be ugly for a minute. I'm in a part of the house that is a little discombobulated, so we're doing some renovation here. So I have to be faceless for now.
No problem. Do your thing, man. I know you look beautiful, and I'm sure your queen says he look even better than that. Go ahead, my brother.
Absolutely. So, it's really mind-boggling, but I'd say, and I didn't catch all of your presentation, but I'd say the Democrats really have no one to blame but themselves. I mean, who's in charge of the Democratic Party? First of all, who's in charge? Because
the Democratic National Committee is supposed to be in charge, but as Ralph Nader said, and we made this point earlier, the corporate elite have taken over the national committees of both parties.
Well, yeah. So whoever's in charge is, I don't know if they're just incompetent or if they're maybe it's a right-wing conspiracy. Maybe it's part of that vast right-wing conspiracy. Maybe they right-wing infiltrated the Democratic Party leadership and pushed them in the direction that he went in this election. Because I mean, number one, I think, let's just face it, Kamala Harris was just not up to the task.
Mm-hmm.
She followed basically a failed administration. There's a lot of reasons we could say that that Joe Biden, even prior to his, the coming out of his cognitive issues, just was not an effective leader. You had the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. You had just a number of blunders. And so I think, and then when Kamala Harris was asked, what would you do differently? She said, I can't think of anything I would do. So as if to say, hey, we did a great job. And I think most people would agree that they didn't. You had the border issue, the so-called border crisis. I mean, you can say what you want about Trump. There was no border crisis under the Trump administration. You can go to the Border Patrol website and look up the numbers on the border encounters. It's right there. They skyrocketed after Biden took power, and he also, this is on record. You can look at the executive orders, which are on the White House website.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole list of executive orders that Trump did that Biden rescinded on day one. So, they started off at a low point and went downhill. Again, I find it hard to believe that people could be this stupid and incompetent. But this is what you have. And, again, the Democrats have no one to blame but themselves, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Again, the central theme of today's program is, and let me double check. Okay, the central theme of today's program is the Democratic Party self-destruction 2024. Right. And I do agree with all the points that you're making. It has been a meltdown, a self-destruction. I do see Brother Ed has just joined the conversation. He says, greetings to the family. He asks, why did Kennedy, and I'm taking to mean Robert Kennedy Jr., and the other person pull out of the Democratic race for president? I can't think of who the other person vying for the Democratic Party candidacy, except for the other person being Biden. Biden pulled out because he was drooling on himself and he couldn't cover it up anymore. Robert Kennedy pulled out because the Democratic National Committee and the media and everyone conspired against him. They called him a wacko. They called him an anti-vaxxer. They called him every name but a Christian, despite the fact that he has given his whole life to that party. And so he pulls out. And of course, the other person they may be talking about, Elon Musk, joining up with Trump. Elon Musk had been a Democratic supporter earlier in his life. And then he, matured and decided he wanted to support the other side and get inside that circle. I can't blame him for that. If somebody wants to be a red tie or a blue tie, let them make that choice. Why should they be castigated and condemned and lied about?
Yeah. I think one of the other issues, if you look at the Democratic Party embraced some really, I'd say, radical and probably totally non-mainstream policies. The Republicans, for example, I remember during the campaign, they played one of their campaign commercials with Kamala Harris making a statement about she would support using taxpayer money to do. I thought it was a fake at first, but I guess it's real. But she was going to. I guess this is in a previous campaign. She was going to support using taxpayer money to assist transgender people, transgender prisoners, to get their transitions. It's just it's like it's totally insane. I mean, who in the mainstream, so-called mainstream America is going to go for that? So I think that's one of the examples. Besides other prisoners, I guess that may play.
Okay, your microphone just stopped. Yeah, Yeah, it sounded like a deep fake, but it
Yeah.
apparently they that statement ran for so long that nobody ever stood up and said this is a deep fake right here. So it apparently was true.
Yeah, I didn't hear anybody contradict it at all or challenge it at all. So
Yeah.
I'm
And
assuming
again,
it was
gender,
correct.
I think they call it gender affirmation healthcare or something like that. They try and couch it and make it sound like it's affirming. It's like turning the birth control society of Margaret Sanger into Planned Parenthood. The still the same predator, but now dressed in a new designer jacket.
Which leads to the next point is the level of pathological dishonesty among the
Hmm.
Democrat establishment is just unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
you have first of all, the border crisis, which they tried to deny. They tried to deny that that they had rescinded all of the policies that kept the border relatively secure. They
Hmm.
tried to deny that the number of people that they were allowing in. They tried to deny the fact that they were subsidizing many of the people with government money. I think that's been pretty well established. In
Hmm.
fact, we know a person who knows a person whose job it is to process migrants,
Hmm.
basically give them debit cards and other things. So they gaslight people about that when they bring that up. um, so it's just one lie after the other. They talk about Trump's lies, but they've propagated quite a few themselves.
Yeah, very true, very true. A few more talking points I have up here. And we welcome your listening audience to join the conversation as well. Just type into the chat. Also, if you can take a moment and just hit the like button, we are always appreciative. Next talking point, and I do see one more comment. We'll get to that. Talking point number 5. In addition to the presidency, now the Republican Party is in charge, will be in charge of the Senate, and likely to increase its majority in the House of Representatives, and could only further consolidate its majority of the Supreme Court should a seat come up within the next 4 years. Could we have imagined any more consolidation of the federal government than that?
No, it's really hard to imagine anything.
Yeah, I mean, at this particular point, as Ralph Nader stated, and as Bernie Sanders stated as well, as I was listening to some of his dialogue, looking for an excerpt from Bernie Sanders to put on for today, the Democrats have basically neutered themselves, spayed themselves. Give the Democrats a pair of scissors, and their voice goes up several pitches.
Give them a rope, they want to be a cowboy, huh? So yeah, it's incredible. And then back to our favorite Democratic candidate. I mean, she talking about pathological dishonesty. I mean, she one of the issues was that I think it got a lot of people was she wouldn't answer questions. I mean, you go to
Hmm.
the CNN interview, for example. Okay, Madam Vice President, day one, what are you going to do? And she
Hmm.
goes off into this soliloquy about, I was a middle class kid, and I flipped burgers at McDonald's, and
So,
mop floors and stuff. And it's like, well, okay, that's great. Well, what does that have to do with what you're going to do on day one? They asked her
what you're
another
going to do
time,
on day one. That's right.
what you going to do? They asked her another time, what was the question? It was, okay, I'm having a brain fart right now, but
Hmm.
she was asked another question about
You still with us? Okay, that was a little bit long of a brain fart. I'm sure he'll be back in just a second. May have had just okay. We have you back now.
so I had a call come in also.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so there was there was that, and then what was the other question she was asked? And
And it did not have to do with anything about flipping burgers and frying fries.
no, it didn't. It'll come to me in a minute. But it just she would never
She's
answer
non-responsive.
questions.
Yeah, she was non-responsive. It's like she was distracted. I would look at images of Kamala Harris, and this is not the greatest point, but I would look at images of her, and from my perspective, there was some craziness dancing behind her eyes.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
other people
Yeah.
have said that, but many of the ones saying that are her political enemies, and so they always say that the other candidate looks like a madman or mad woman. And I don't think any one of us could say that Donald Trump doesn't have a whole lot of craziness dancing behind his eyes or up under his comb over.
Right. Yeah. So that's not really you could apply that criteria to both of them.
Of course, both of them, we could apply that same criteria to both of them. They look crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But, she just, she a lot of times had this deer in the headlights look on her face. So I just, I think she didn't really present herself as very presidential in my opinion. And again,
That's right.
she just would not, would dodge a lot of questions.
Now, there's another comment that's come in from Brother Ronan, who's in our not Facebook, it's YouTube listening audience today. I don't push up many of our shows on YouTube because they ban me for talking about science, so I don't think they would ban us for talking about the Democrats today. But before I get to his comment, I think his comment complements this next talking point. The talking point: to what extent might we imagine that Israel's brutal assaults against Muslims across 7 countries and the Biden-Harris sworn loyalty to Netanyahu, to what extent could that become a factor that turned Muslims and many peace-loving youth against the candidate? Did you want to respond to that before I put Ronan's comment on that same statement? Okay, Mumbere is going in and out. Okay. I see you're back again.
Yeah, repeat that question for me, please. I got distracted.
Yeah. To what extent?
You were talking about Israel. Go ahead.
Yeah. To what extent might Israel's brutal assaults against Muslims across 7 countries and the Biden-Harris sworn loyalty to Netanyahu become a factor that turned Muslims and many peace-loving young people against the candidate?
Well, I don't know, because Trump is pretty beholden to the Zionists also. So, in fact, Bibi, I think, recently commented that he was anxious to talk to Donald, not President Trump, but Donald, and have a conversation about various things. So I think that's that on that issue, both sides are beholden to the Zionist.
Yeah. And Ronan's comment, because I was about to interject with something extremely rude and crude, and so let me read Ronan's comment, and hopefully I'll forget about wanting to say Donald Trump saying to Trump or to Biden and Harris, "Move out the way. Let me show you how to take care of that thing." But right. Ronan says AIPAC are the Democratic leaders throwing rocks behind their hands. I would say that the AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, dominates both parties, because they did get several of the outspoken critics of Netanyahu and Israel, managed to get them dumped in their primary elections. They spent many billions of dollars in this current electoral campaign. And one of the still unsettled Senate votes is for Nevada, where Jackie Rosen has been the senator, and she's a candidate up again, and it's a very close race. They haven't even called it as of now. But Jackie Rosen, on that list of AIPAC contributions, she was definitely in the top 20 list. I think she came in about number 14 or something, receiving well over $1 million from AIPAC.
Well, what's the saying? Money talks and everything else walks.
Yeah, well, everything else is slithering on its belly right now while money is soaring. And not just AIPAC, but the entirety of the billionaire class. And hey, Elon Musk joined that too. Elon Musk put up $1 billion political action committee and used it in opposition to the others. Elon Musk using his money to support the Democratic Party or the Republican Party candidate, Donald Trump, expecting to get a position within the Trump cabinet or ministry. And also, I did a show just a couple of days ago talking about population and population control and fertility decline. And I listed a whole bunch of billionaires who were spending a lot of money on population related issues. But of all of the billionaires, including Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, the Rockefellers, Oprah Winfrey, a bunch of them, I named at least a dozen of them. Of all of them, Elon Musk was spending money, but he was spending money with the idea that the declining working class was a problem for the nation. So he is spending money in a pro-natalist policy.
Absolutely, and you know, all of the money that's sloshing around the so-called political process makes you really wonder, you know, how much of a democracy we have. I've got an article, and this touches on not so much the monetary issue, but the bureaucratic issue. It's called "Vote All You Want: The Secret Government is going to do what it wants." And it talks about the, you know, the government that we elect is not really the government that runs the country anyway. So you got that aspect as well.
Yeah.
But, you know, all of these billions of dollars floating through the system really makes you wonder how much of a democratic process it is. And, you know, how much you can buy your democracy.
We've done analyses along those lines several times here. And according to, I did one program, which ocracy, the suffix ocracy, do you live in? And we came up with, I think there were 23 different ocracies, from plutocracy, aristocracy, you have a theocracy, I like the one Baba Junius gave us, kakistocracy, which means governance by the least qualified. And if you look at the two candidates for the U.S. presidential election at this particular time, the two candidates that the media allowed us to know even were running, even though there were 6 candidates running, that would be evidence of a kakistocracy. If this is the best that the red tie party or the blue tie party can put up, then this is a kakistocracy, governance by the least qualified. Your thought?
Yes, I agree 100%. I vaguely remember that show, and you know, there's an overall degeneration, decline, malaise in this country anyway, and so we would expect with the cultural decline, the political decline, the economic decline, the high rates of, you know, national debt, the rampant corruption at all levels of government. We would expect this scenario to play out the way it is playing out, in my opinion.
That's right. Yeah. It's predictable, but only predictable if your brain is not trapped in the matrix of traditional, or the not even traditional, the new paradigm shift in party politics in the United States, where the parties have merged with the corporate class, and now they manipulate the population, getting them to vote against their own best self-interest. Now, that's some really crazy stuff. Brother Ronan did type into the chat one of the ocracies we had talked about, gynocracy, meaning rule by women. And to no small extent, I cannot disagree with the point Ronan's making.
Yeah, well, you know, we have no problem with women in positions of power, but you have to be coherent. You have to be honest. You know, and the other question that she had avoided numerous times until she was pinned down was how was she going to deal with inflation? That was the other question I was trying to remember that Kamala kept dodging. But anyway, yeah, so we have no problem with women in power, but they need to be competent. They need to be capable. they need to be honest. I mean,
That's
I
right.
think again that's the other issue is that she just wasn't honest. She wouldn't answer questions, and she didn't seem to have a firm grasp of some of the issues that she was asked about.
Beyond any question, women in political leadership and governance have brought many, many valued qualities to the nations. I point to the 6 African women who have been national leaders on the African continent. United States is still struggling to find their first president or national leader, prime minister, but African countries have a much, much better record. And all 6 of them, we can point to their leadership, such as Dr. Sirleaf Johnson, leader of, was it Liberia? Liberia, in the aftermath of the Civil War. She did a wonderful job of helping the country to rebuild its infrastructure and rebuild its industrial base and put Liberia on a positive GDP growth rate. So yeah, we're not against women leadership. We are against incompetence, manipulation, machinations, and I am against, and I hope you agree, I am against corporate shills. People pretending to be something when in actuality behind the scenes they're just fronting for the corporate elite dictatorship.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, a lot of our political leadership is caught up in that matrix.
That's right.
Quite a few of them. So,
speaking of gynocracy, talking point number 7. Did anyone other than myself find that the feminist charge of abortion went too far and ended up isolating people who weren't particularly concerned on the matter?
Could you read that question again?
Yes.
You lost me there a little bit.
Did anyone other than myself find that the feminist charge of abortion went too far and ended up isolating people who weren't particularly concerned on the matter?
Now, when you say the feminine charge of abortion, what exactly do you mean?
In maybe 40% of the commercials by women candidates for the Democratic Party was all about defending a woman's right. We know that's about the charge of abortion. In my perspective, and Elon Musk obviously agrees, the problem is not too many people. The problem is too many greedy, blood-sucking vampires and too much consumerism. And that in actuality, abortion for me has gone way too far. Just looking at black people in America since 1973, over 22.7 million abortions to black women, disproportionate to their population by a long way, has resulted in the accumulation, because it is like what they call it, compound interest. You abort a female, you abort a family in the next generation. We have sacrificed 42 million black children just due to abortion alone. Has it gone way too far?
Yes, absolutely. I think we we are, following or I wouldn't say we, but some of our people are following in the mainstream, the so-called mainstream pattern in terms of abortion. And I think, I think it's gone way too far also. And I think that was another topic that turned a lot of people off, was their emphasis on a woman's right to choose, which I don't think, in my estimation, was not threatened at all. I mean, I think according to the right wing, what they did was they left it up to the states, which is, I suppose, what's supposed to be done constitutionally. Right. So they didn't. It wasn't an abortion ban at all. It was a decision that was moved over to the states to decide.
That's right. That's right. And they did have this referendum across many states, and a significant number of states, I think at least 4, and that's a significant number, did agree to put in their state constitution abortion accessibility up to a certain point of viability. These laws do change from state to state, and I do agree it would be a states' rights issue to put the decision closer to the political body that would be more directly impacted by the loss of or the gain of children in the population. So, yeah, I think it went way too far. Point number 8, similar to the abortion ideology, how deep is the anti-glibet or LBGTQ plus alphabet people? How deep is the anti-glibet sentiment expressed in this 2024 presidential election?
I think it's extremely deep, as we discussed before. The commercial that the Republicans ran, where Kamala was promising to fund gender transition surgeries for prisoners using taxpayer money, and then you had this. I saw a lot of other commercials about various so-called liberal politicians supporting so-called trans. Now, I always get this mixed up. So if you if you start out a male and you're mimicking a female, that's a trans female, or is that a trans male? I guess it's trans female. Anyway, those basically biological males participating in female sports. That was another sore point for a lot of people. That was emphasized by the right wing, and I think rightfully so, as it's another demonstration of just pure insanity, really. I mean, it's like what sane society does this, sets this scenario up. So I think I don't think anybody's against the glibet people in general, but I think the overreach is what really annoyed and concerned people.
Yeah, I do agree. And just the way you express it, I have nothing about what you just said that I would change or disagree with. And it was important. It is important, especially to immigrant families who still, compared to long or intergenerational American born, immigrant families hold on to the value of childbearing, much, much more than the domestic. If you look at the fertility rates, total fertility rates of women, American women, including African American women, have dipped far below replacement rate. And if it wasn't for the children born to immigrant women in this country, the United States would not be moving still in a competitive way in the global GDP competition. But the United States would start to, like Japan, lose its grip as it experiences an aging workforce, an aging population, and a birth dearth. So it does matter, even though it's a complicated issue. Unfortunately, when we tune into the contemporary media or listen to these political pundits in these conversations, they don't seem to be able to appreciate or even be honest about the challenge of childbirthing in a world where consumption is way too high, but in a world where also the global population is imbalanced, because for 500 to 600 years, Africa was depleted of its children, while its children were, some of them, shipped out around the world to make other nations wealthy. Meanwhile, it wasn't until 1997, Brother Bombera, that Africa finally caught up with the 600 million African born that were missing from the continent's history. 600 million didn't catch up until 1997. Now Africa has the momentum, what they call the demographic dividend.
Absolutely. So if you're a Pan-Africanist, you're really it's a good picture, because on the other hand, the European countries and the so-called Western countries, I think pretty much all are experiencing various levels of birth dearth. You have this country, for example, and you've got. I was reading an article about the Social Security system and how it's there's a threat to it, because basically you don't have, because of the demographic shift, you don't have as many young people paying into the system. So
and too many old people drawing out of the system.
Exactly. And you have a growing elderly population that's drawing out of it. Exactly. So, and this is a situation in most of the Western countries.
That's right.
So,
and many of the East Asian countries too. Now you have the Pacific
Japan.
Rim, Southeast Pacific Rim, South Korea,
Right.
Japan, Singapore, China, Russia. I just did this updated my data about a week ago and did a report here on LAB Radio. There are now 53 nations identified as having experienced or currently experiencing shrinking populations. 53, Brother Mumbera. I did that report a year or so ago, and it was like 9.
Yeah, so I wonder if there's some, I don't want to get too far out, but if there's some metaphysical aspect to this, because if you look at the other aspect of these Western and so-called advanced industrial societies is their level of environmental destruction that they've wrought. So I wonder if there's some kind of a metaphysical, I guess, or natural, rebalancing that's taking place as these these societies have reached the peak of their growth, but also their level of destruction, and now it's starting to decline, and perhaps will bode well for the future of the planet and its ecosystems.
Yeah, some people have put forward that Earth is a sentient being, that Earth has a spirit, a soul, and it responds to the environment in adjusting, like the temperature. When you and I have a nasty infection, our body raises its temperature to burn off the bacteria. And
Right.
so I do sign on to that point, that Earth, Mother Earth, is a sentient being, a spirit and a soul, and it does adjust. And part of the world dealing with this pathological species called humanity, part of dealing with that is to raise the temperature and make it more difficult to replicate this species.
Right. and then put that, unleash that trend or that tendency to not reproduce as much
That's right.
as in the past.
Right.
So
and of
it's
course, it could be also pointed to sociological factors, a whole bunch of them. In the
Right.
book, The Birth of Earth, Ben Wattenberg lists 14. I upgraded that this past weekend. It's probably well over 25 social reasons why people are not fecund and fertile and bearing children.
Right. Yeah. The economics has changed a lot. I mean, you have young people who really don't have the same opportunities that we had in our generation, previous generations, in terms of being able to buy houses, gainful employment, so on and so forth. So there's definitely reasons for that.
Another talking
For that
point.
shift.
I think you're going to like this talking point. After 4 years and a failed promise of solution, why hasn't the Biden presidency been more effective at a workable solution for the persistence of issues like homelessness and undocumented immigration?
Interesting question. I would say maybe the ruling class benefits from those phenomenon. If you look at immigration, so-called immigration, migration, you have a labor force or a group of people coming in who will work for lower wages than I guess native born Americans. I guess that's one aspect of it. Homelessness, that's a very, I guess, complex topic, but I think it goes back to the general degeneration of the society in terms of opportunities for its people, in terms of economics, in terms of you've had, of course, a major shift in the manufacturing base away from the United States and into other countries, which has had a significant impact in the employability and the ability of people to be employed in the working class. So, and one of my favorite, I guess, rhetorical questions over the last few years has been, with the advent of robotics and AI, once these technologies basically take over and they wash your car and your clothes and cook your food and various other things, they take you to the airport and whatever. So once these technologies, kind of take over, then what is the utility and the purpose of the human?
So maybe this decline in fertility, decline in population is setting up so the corporate dominated world of the future won't need nearly so many people to fulfill all these wages. They'll just keep building robots to replace all of us.
Exactly. I mean, I saw an article on one of the job boards a couple of days ago that was talking about how, there was a software developer who was expressing concern that AI was taking over in many of the software development areas, and how the executives loved it because, you don't have to, of course, with AI, you don't have to, pay benefits and worry about maternity leave and things like that. And so it's definitely a trend to watch and to be concerned about.
Yeah, the fourth industrial revolution, we've talked about that many times. The global reset, these policies by the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab and the Davos Group. Yeah,
right.
There's a lot of kind of interweaving of this thread of what we're talking about today. Again, today we're talking about the Democratic Party self-destruction 2024. Isn't it true? Talking point number 10. Isn't it true that people, quote, vote with their pocketbooks, unquote, and that neither party or Harris's promises seem to be able to stand up for the interests of the workers' middle class in favor of wealth and income concentration?
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. It goes back to my previous rhetorical question. So I think the ruling class, again, sees the writing on the wall, and so they, I think, are positioning themselves to deal with the backlash of a lack of jobs, lack of opportunities, and so I think they're trying to kind of channel the energy of a frustrated working class in a direction that doesn't, that doesn't make the populace turn on them and see them for what they are, which is a bunch of, they're the useless eaters, actually, because they don't produce anything. They got it backwards.
That's right.
It's not the, the bankers and the ruling class. They don't do anything. They don't produce. They don't build. They don't grow. They don't transport. All they do is they've set up these systems that basically they're able to leech off of the efforts and the energies and the skills of the working class.
All they do is borrow money, use that money to order people to do things, and then pay back far less than what they gained from borrowing that money from a system rigged to give them cheap, easy access to capital.
Exactly.
Talking point number 11. And we got two more talking points in here before we're going to begin to wrap it up. Now, one's a little complex. I actually copied this from one of the research articles that I wrote. That I was reading. They wrote, the Democrats' turnout efforts were inadequate. Many Americans didn't vote. We'll know later about who the non-voters were. But here are some preliminary factoids. In 2020, Trump got 74.2 million votes. This year, he got 72.1 million votes, 2.1 million fewer. In 2020, Biden got 81.2 million votes. This year, Harris got about 67.2 million votes. That's
Wow.
14 million fewer votes. That
Wow.
means that lots of people who voted for Biden in 2020 didn't even bother to cast their vote this year. Both the Republican and Democratic presidential candidates got fewer votes this year, but the Democratic candidate Harris got far fewer votes. Some version of this occurred in almost every state.
And I heard some analysts who were talking about the lack of participation in the urban areas, which
Mm-hmm.
would have normally voted blue,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's an interesting phenomenon also. And I think it just shows you the disaffection of the a lot of the working class, and especially the black folks, because we're a major component of the urban areas. And then, they try to spin it and blame black males for not turning up for Kamala. But, I think there were compelling reasons why that happened that we've
Yeah.
discussed previously.
And also, Muslims did not turn up. Many so-called Hispanics or people of Latin heritage did not show up as well. And I agree with your point about the urban populations were disenfranchised ideologically. And these represent the so-called swing states. So if she lost 14 million votes, we can only imagine. I guess we could go back and check the data if someone wants to look that deep. I'm not interested in it. Of which of these swing states did these missing votes show up in? And that's probably why. And I was double checking all of this early yesterday, and there might have been one swing state that the Harris candidacy won. But of the 7 or 8 swing states, Trump was taking all of them. And that's how they actually signaled the win way before the tally, the West Coast tally had even come in. Of course, the West Coast, the entire West Coast, the Pacific time zone, except for Alaska and Hawaii, which are actually a little bit further west, all of them voted for the Democrats. And that was easily predicted: Washington, Oregon, California. But when it came down to the swing states, pretty much all of the swing states were either Eastern or the Midwest. And when they all went to Donald Trump, they could call the race at that point.
Right. Absolutely.
So, one more talking point. This is about Bernie Sanders. And I was trying to find something quotable from Bernie Sanders, but, Bernie, bless his heart. Bless his heart. I'm not going to go into deep. But Bernie Sanders did ask this question: why did Kamala Harris take Liz Cheney, yes, that Cheney family, on the campaign trail with her and not invite Bernie Sanders to go on the campaign trail?
That's one of the other bizarre aspects of this whole Democrat operation. So if you recall back to the second Bush administration, Dick Cheney was he the vice president then?
Yeah, he was one. He was in the basement of the White House on 9/11.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a palpable hatred of Dick Cheney as, this Darth Vader type figure that was just, power hungry and maniacal even. And so it's really interesting that now the Democrats, and I think maybe this is part of their downfall also. It's really interesting that the Democrat leadership decided for some reason to latch on to the demon spawn Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney also. It's just bizarre. I don't get it.
Well,
I don't get it at all. They hated Dick Cheney. They hated Dick Cheney.
But the oligarchy loved neoconservatism. They love the neocons. That's the word. They love the neocons. And essentially, by Dick Cheney joining up with the Harris campaign, is saying to the neocons, psst, she's one of us.
Yep, and she's not going to get elected though. That's what the populists are saying. It's just
Yeah. Well, luckily they had Donald Trump in their other hip pocket.
yeah,
He's not
absolutely.
necessarily a neocon, but he has been given two warnings here recently. I'm not going to talk more about those warnings because we don't want to use that language on these platforms. But he was
Yeah.
given two warnings. You walk the line, or else you'll go down in history a whole different kind of way than what you might imagine.
Well, I really am surprised he's made it this far. I mean, because I think one of the reasons they originally did go after him is because he was, somewhat of a what's the term, a disruptor in the first
Mm-hmm.
term, at least initially. He
Mm-hmm.
proposed to be in terms of dismantling the bureaucracies, the out of control government spending, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, maybe he got the message
That's
and
right. And
is reforming, quote unquote, and shifting his views.
well, that's
And
very interesting because as he's coming into position now as a dismantler and disruptor, many are predicting, including himself, that he's going to start to withdraw from NATO alliance. He says that one of his first acts will be to create a resolution and end to the Ukraine war, which I think all of us would agree should be ended as soon as possible. Stop pouring money into that endless abyss of trying to control, contain Russia, and
yeah,
let's get back to the pace of let's invest in the things that allow for gross domestic product to increase and workers to get real jobs, and let alone. But when it comes to Zionism, it's hard to tell whether Donald Trump will be a disruptor and a dismantler there, or will Donald Trump just say to Biden and Harris, get on out the way. Let me show you how to handle this thing here. And I'm not going to elaborate on that because that's just nasty.
yeah. I think it would be very difficult for him to be anything other than a supporter of the regime over there. And and then if we recall, his first administration, it was symbolic, but it was a major move. He moved the American embassy. Was it in Tel Aviv and moved it to Jerusalem, I think?
Yeah.
So that was a major move. And so I don't think we're going to see anything different from him in terms of Israeli policy. I don't think there's going to be any disruptions in what's going on between Israel and the United States.
Have you heard my analysis? It's of the upcoming book I'm writing right now, Disaster Preparedness for World Wars 5 and 6.
No, I haven't. I think I missed that show.
Yeah,
Or
well,
caught the
just to
tail end of it.
briefly summarize here, it's actually been a series now. I think we're up to about at least 12 parts, 10 or 12 parts to what's going to be maybe a 20-part series as a book. But basically what I did is I redefined world wars, beginning with the
Yes.
beginning of the 20th century. The First World War, they call it the Great War. I call it the last great imperial competition, or the last great imperial wars.
That
The
was World War
second,
One,
that was
right?
World War One. So
Yeah,
Second
the
World
war
War,
to end all wars.
yeah, the war to end all wars began a whole new series of wars.
Right. We see how that ended up. Go ahead.
World War II, I redefined as an attempt by fascist powers to take over empires that the Western powers had dominated. So the fascist powers, Japan building an empire across and taking empires away from the French, the British, and the Dutch. You have, of course, Germany attempting to capture Europe and take the French and British empires. But in the end, they all got tricked. And the Italians, of course, starting World War II by expanding their fascist empire into Ethiopia. But they all got tricked by Uncle Sam, who played them deftly. He waited until the fascists had expended themselves on each other, and then Uncle Sam comes in, cleans it all up, and at the end, at the Bretton Woods conference, is able to establish the basis for what I have now been terming World War VI. World War V and World War VI. So World War III becomes the Cold War, which was not a Cold War. It was a blazing hot war with hot war and over 20 million people dying in at least 23 countries that fought the so-called Cold War. World War IV, I define as the war, the global war against Islam. And where we look at the overthrow of the elected governments of Iran, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan morphs into the American invasion of Afghanistan, war against Syria, Libya, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, war against Pakistan, war against Mali and Chad and Niger. This is a global war.
Yeah, I think they call that GWOT, right? The Global War on
Jihad.
Terror, which was no GWOT, GWOT, the Global War on Terror, which was actually a global war of terror, if you look at it.
And Samuel Huntington called it the clash of civilizations, the West against Islam. And when we look at it that way, it makes it very, very clear. And we can list all these countries, Somalia, we can list a whole bunch of countries, Islamic dominated populations that became subject to massive amounts of bombing, as well as proxy warfares. So, and that is still going on. Israel, war against 7 different nations simultaneously, including Iran, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, because the West Bank is still Jordan, Palestine, and Syria. I may have said Syria twice, but Israel, I identify it at war against 7 Islamic countries simultaneously. And Israel, from my analysis, is a proxy of the West, NATO, American, British alliance.
Agreed.
So we're in a dilemma. And the next war, World War V, I define as the corporate elite globalists versus the workers' middle class. And I name the battle lines and say, these are weapons of war, these are the battle lines, this is the evidence, this is taking place, and these are the people dying. This is a World War V. And then World War VI, I just finished a 2-part series yesterday. World War VI is entitled NATO versus the BRICS Plus Alliance.
Yeah, I like that analysis. I don't know where I would throw COVID in, but I would consider COVID to be a global war, another global war of terror. That was 5. Okay. Global war of terror.
Well, it's terror, but also that COVID, we're not supposed to say that word here on LIB Radio. That's okay. Don't worry about it. But
I thought you were on Rumble now. I thought it didn't matter.
Oh, I kind of snuck in a second YouTube channel.
That's right. You're okay. My bad.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Because if they cancel it, I don't care.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Under the banner of the global corporatists, the corporate elite versus the workers' middle class, that pandemic was a major battlefront. And they've queued up another one to happen at any given time. In the upcoming book, I have a whole chapter on black swan events. These are unpredictables that could happen at any given time. And I list about 24 black swan events, one of which already queued up is the World Health Organization's attempt to put in an international pandemic convention agreement so that nations lose their sovereignty as soon as another pandemic is declared. And who has been the one country leading and declaring and dominating these pandemics? You know who I'm talking about.
Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam.
Yeah, because we don't. Doesn't the United States provide major funding for the WHO? In addition to Bill Gates. Excuse me, Bill Gates is a major
Bill
funder.
Gates Bill used to be till Trump kind of upset that cart. Then Bill Gates steps in and says, "Hey, don't worry about it. I got you covered."
Right.
And if Trump comes in and upsets that cart again about Bretton Woods, this is real risky because with BRICS Plus expanding, it just had a major expansion now, 14 new partners along with the 9 members. If BRICS keeps making these moves, part of their move is threatening to pull out of or create an alternative to the UN, World Health Organization, Bretton Woods structure. That interwoven web, global web that's been dominating so many of our lives. From my perspective, that would be a good move. Either Bretton Woods and UN gets reformed or dump it. Let it decay.
Well, it would be a good move for the majority of the world's population. Of course, it would be pretty painful for citizens in the United States and some of the other Western countries. We'll see.
That's right. We're going to have to begin to wrap up today's conversation. I'm so grateful, Brother Mumbere, that you stepped up and took this charge. I had another brother who said he would do it, and then he decided he didn't want to do it. And I couldn't think of anybody better than you. Of course, Baba Junius and Brother Duara, or other members of the mastermind, are very, very good at discussing and having flexible discussions about what is happening in the world, politics, future studies, etc. But you did a slam up great job today, Brother Mumbere.
Well, I appreciate it, Keaty. I appreciate all the work you do, and keep it up. We need the information. We need to be knowledgeable about what's going on around us, and then have the information to make the appropriate decisions to move forward.
That's right. And Brother Ronan, you did a great job today in the commentary on that YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like button there. And lastly, his last comment, because he had a bunch of small comments, and I appreciate them all. He said, outstanding commentary. Brother Ronan, I completely agree. I'll send you my text number and let's stay in contact. Brother Mumbere, any final thoughts? Now seeing what has happened with this election this week, 2 points. Let me ask you one quick question. I did the best I could to hold out. I may have been the last person in the nation to find out who won that election. Were you also kind of disconnected from this, or did you monitor it in real time?
I did, but I wasn't really rigorous about it. So I would check in on the mainstream, some of the mainstream outlets, and then I'd check out and do some other things. So I wasn't really intensively following it because I kind of knew what was going to happen anyway, or I thought I knew what was going to happen, and it did happen. Yeah. So I was moderately engaged, but not as engaged as some of the other people out here.
Yeah. I disengaged as much as I possibly could, and then finally, expected to hear some cheering and championing if a decision had gone that way, which is exactly what happened. Were you with us when we were in Africa when Obama got elected?
No, I was not.
Yeah, because you did go with us with Africa for the Africans. You and your queen went with us. Am I correct?
No, we went to Jamaica.
Okay,
we went to the Living Superfood Retreat in Jamaica. When was that?
Oh, that was
about
awesome.
5-6 years ago. Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
But the morning
Jamaica, man.
Yeah, man, I love it. But the morning that Obama was elected, we were at the One Africa Resort in the Cape Coast region, and we woke up in the morning with all the screaming of African women, all joy at the top of the lungs, and we knew exactly that Obama had won that election that year. And it was interesting. All of the screaming and championing were basically all female voices. But it was what it was. It is what it is. They do what they do. And we can't fault them for having passion and commitment the way they do. We just want to make sure it's logical and reasonable and not just emotional sentimentality manipulated by mass media, controlled by the greedy corporate elite. Your final thoughts as we go to close.
Yeah, like we got at this last election. Emotional reactions controlled by the corporate elite. That pretty much says it all. And we really got to work on that. We got to get beyond this red blue okie doke. And I think,
do you have any predictions? You have any predictions you want to share?
No, I think it's going to be business as usual. I think, a lot of people are hoping for Trump to disrupt a lot of things that I kind of don't think that's going to happen. I think, you got in areas like maybe some of the bureaucracies will be reduced. But I haven't heard anybody talk about, deficit reduction, the fact that we're spending now, the biggest line item in the federal budget, according to one article I saw, is now servicing the national debt. We spend more money servicing the national debt than we do on defense spending, which is the second biggest line item. So that's right. Nobody's talking about that, and whether or not that's a sustainable situation. And then if it's not a sustainable situation, what do we do about it? I don't hear anybody talking about that, Democrat or Republican.
Had Harris been elected, she was going to run up the bill at an even faster rate.
At an even faster rate, and more inflation, more currency devaluation.
That's right.
So it's do you want a 2x4 upside the head, or do you want a punch in the gut? Take your pick. That's what we're getting.
2x4, does it have nails in it, or the punch in the gut have nails in it?
No nails involved, but still, it's a 2x4 versus a punch in the gut. So not going to be comfortable.
I'll take the punch in the gut.
Okay.
Hey, listen, let's out of here. I am going to have some predictions. I'm going to hold those predictions until Sunday so I can kind of think about them and not just flip them off the top of my head. But I am going to put forward some predictions for what to expect. But I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be kind of ugly. Not for everybody. Some people are going to see the handwriting on the wall, just as many people saw the handwriting on the wall 100 years ago with the dissolution of the Weimar Republic, hyperinflation in Germany, and then we saw what rose in the aftermath of that and how devastating that was to the world. So some of this is just a cycle of history repeating itself.
Absolutely. Cycles of history. History's it is what's the saying? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, maybe. Is that it? Anyway.
I like that one. Well, we do know, Malcolm X said, of all of our studies, history is most qualified to reward our research. And John Henrik Clarke said, history is like a road map. It doesn't necessarily tell you where you're going, but it tells you where you are, where you've come from, and where you are. Or maybe I messed that up. Maybe it does tell you where you should be expecting to be going. John Henrik Clarke, Malcolm X, and other wise ones told us, do pay attention to history. On that note, I think we got everything in today, didn't we? All right. I want to thank you, Brother Mumbera, for tuning in, for being with your brother. To everyone who tuned in today, much gratitude. You've been tuned into your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio, LIB TV, and LivingInBlack.com. Tell your friends to tell their friends. We have our own now. And you know something? Ours is pretty respectable. On your favorite, we aim to be your favorite. LIB Radio, LIB TV, on LivingInBlack.com. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.
Peace.